Many people find that the moon is magical to stare at from a distance, but it can be equally as enchanting to view it from up close through a telescope. A lot of the craters that litter the lunar surface have been named after people who have contributed to science, people that are recognized as some of the most brilliant minds in recorded history. For example, Tycho is an impact crater that is named after a famous Danish astronomer of the 16th century. Copernicus is a crater named after the famous mathematician and astronomer who proposed that the sun, rather than the earth, was at the center of the universe. Kepler is a crater named after the German astronomer who was a key figure in the 17th century scientific revolution, probably best known for his laws of planetary motion. He also has a famous space telescope that's named after him, which is now used to search for exoplanets, that is, planets that are outside of our solar system. Aristarchus is named after an ancient Greek astronomer who suspected that the stars were just other bodies similar to our own sun. So you can see that these and many other craters, not to mention other lunar features such as mountain ranges, can be clearly seen through a telescope, or if you don't have access to one, you can take a look at some of the fascinating footage that has been uploaded online, mostly disseminated freely by amateurs, that contain just enough detail that if you look very closely, you might even be able to make out tiny metallic objects that seem to be leaving one of the craters near the side of the moon that never faces the Earth. Now, I obviously can't verify these, but there is another crater. There's one in particular that I would like to draw your attention to that's on the dark side of the moon. And this crater is named after Jack Parsons, an American rocket and propulsion engineer, one of the principal founders of the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, or JPL, and a high priest in a cult founded by sex magician and occult author Aleister Crowley. Jack Parsons would invoke Aleister Crowley's Hymn to Pan before each rocket test. To get a better idea or a feel for Crowley's poetry, let us listen to him briefly recite a few verses in his own voice. This one is titled Pentagram.
In the years of the primal force, in the dawn of terrestrial birth, man mastered the mammoth and horse, and man was the lord of the earth. He made him an hollow skin from the heart of an holy tree. He compassed the earth therein, and man was the lord of the sea. He controlled the vigor of steam, he harnessed the lightning for hire, he drove the celestial team, and man was the lord of the fire. Deep-mouthed from their thrones, deep-seated, the choirs of the eons declare the last of the demons defeated. For man is the lord of the air. Arise, O man, in thy strength, the kingdom is thine to inherit, till the high gods witness at length that man is the lord of his spirit.
Aleister Crowley perceived Jack Parsons with high regard, as someone who may one day be his successor. Crowley made his respect and admiration clear when confiding in another member and saying, and I quote, "Parsons is the most valued member of the whole order, with no exception," end quote. Jack Parsons was a chemist, but a better term might be alchemist. He is credited with inventing a solid type rocket fuel, revolutionizing the entire industry, so much so that former Nazi rocket scientist and the head of NASA, Wernher von Braun, called Parsons the father of American rocketry. JPL was established during the early 1940s, which also happened to be during World War II. As many people now know, thanks to declassified documents, the United States brought thousands of Nazi scientists over both during and immediately following the war in what is known as Operation Paperclip. So the American scientist, Jack Parsons, was working shoulder to shoulder with German scientists with similar occult philosophies. One of the problems that the United States had was that they were so far behind the Germans, not only in technology in the context that most people understand, such as with jet engines, but in paranormal research, which to the majority of the US sounded exactly like science fiction. This leads us to L. Ron Hubbard, a fairly successful science fiction author before the war, who, like his father, was naval intelligence. Drawing upon his imaginative background in science fiction, Hubbard was called up to try to make sense of what the Nazis were working on, with the expectation that the US would benefit somehow, either by making weapons, gaining technology, or at least learning more about their very secretive enemy and their bizarre activities. This is why L. Ron Hubbard, author of Dianetics, The Modern Science of Mental Health, and the founder of the Church of Scientology, not only gained exposure to mind control technology and an elevated understanding of the workings of the mind, he also was one of the first people, if not the very first individual, to start denouncing many of the newly formed CIA activities, which can all be lumped together and called MK Ultra, which stands for mind control. In German, it's spelled with a K. So Hubbard was Jack Parsons' roommate in Pasadena, California, where they participated in occult sex orgies together. Hubbard was deeply into the occult from an early age.
A magician, the magic cults of the 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th centuries in the Middle East were fascinating. The only modern work that has anything to do with them is a trifle wild in spots, but it's fascinating work in itself, and that's work written by Aleister Crowley, the late Aleister Crowley, my very good friend. And he did himself a splendid piece of aesthetics built around those magic cults. It's a very interesting reading to get a hold of a copy of a book, quite rare, but it can be obtained, The Master Therion, Therion, The Master Therion by Aleister Crowley. He signs himself The Beast, the mark of the beast, 666. Very, very something around.
While there has been debate as to the degree of influence Aleister Crowley has had on L. Ron Hubbard and Scientology, let's see what L. Ron Hubbard's son has to say.
My first guest, Ron DeWolf, was the son of the missing L. Ron Hubbard. Let's give him a big round of applause, please.
His deep involvement in personal use of drugs on himself and others, black magic.
When you say black magic, what are you talking about? I mean, some of the things that I read in the stack of material, it sounds just absolutely unbelievable. What are you talking about when you say this?
Well, the funny thing is that the actual truth is about as far out as Scientology itself. Really, the basis of Scientology, which is rather hidden and covered over, is the occult, the deep involvement with satanic powers. That he felt that he was deeply involved with a British black magician called Aleister Crowley, and through putting himself in deep hypnotic trances and the use of drugs on himself, he wanted to become the most powerful being in the world.
How would you describe what Scientology is all about and what the Church of Scientology is all about?
Well, to put it in layman sort of a succinct terms, Scientology says basically that 74 trillion years ago, everyone willed themselves into existence, and through space opera games and science fiction sort of things, they have created this universe. This is a universe created by you, me, and everybody else. And now we find ourselves trapped into bodies, and the goal of Scientology is to get untrapped from these bodies and to return to this godlike state which is called operating Thetan.
How do you do that?
Through applied philosophy, through sitting down across from each other in chairs with e-meters, which is a skin galvanometer with a meter dial on it, and through answering questions and asking questions. This is supposed to release the various charges and the problems one has had throughout all of these centuries and hundreds and thousands of reincarnations, get the charge off it as if it was these incidents were a charged battery, and by doing so, this is supposed to return you to this state of high ability. He was very deeply involved in black magic from early teenage years, which was the use of drugs and hypnosis as an example. He used to conjure up these demons and thereby plug into them or have them plug into him, and a lot of his early writing was, which could be called spirit writing. And so he was very deeply involved in black magic as an example, especially from Aleister Crowley, which was an English black magician. And around 1947 or so, he decided that he was the Beast 666 incarnate, because that's what Aleister Crowley was, and he died in 1947.
While Crowley was a high-level Freemason, there are reports that L. Ron Hubbard was a Rosicrucian, at least for a brief period in 1940. The ancient and mystic Order of the Rosy Cross, as the organization is formally known, has the symbol of a cross with a rose at its center. It has several meanings, depending on the source, some claiming that the Rosy Cross predates Christianity, where the cross represents the human body and the rose represents the individual's unfolding consciousness. That's one interpretation. Looking at this cross, we can clearly see 8 points, which can be traced back to the 8-pointed star of Inanna of Sumer and Ishtar of ancient Babylon. This covert form of goddess worship was infused into the European secret societies